Hello everyone, my name's Samantha and we're now standing facing the Western Range. So this would be the front entrance to the Birkenhead Priory. This would be the entrance by which visitors would arrive, the monks arrived, and the building you can see in front of us is the Western Range, and directly next to it is the undercroft on the ground floor, and above the refectory, the monks' refectory where they used to eat. An award-winning roof was installed into the monks' refectory in 1996, which enabled us to use it for events and recitals and plays and markets, all sorts of wonderful events. So that room can now be used. But the monks would have eaten in silence up in the monks' refectory twice a day. Now, what I'm going to do now is take you into the Western Range. So do excuse the noise, we're very close to Camel Edge shipyards. And there's a ship being repaired at the moment in Dry Dock 5. It's absolutely fascinating to watch. So here we are at the entrance into the Western Range. Okay. So this area you can see before you is the Great Hall. It would have been an absolutely impressive room, I'm sure. There was a single floor on this section of it, and in the far distance there you can see the monks' parlour and the prior's lodgings above. They would have had two floors over at the far end there. So the Great Hall was used for visitors and ferry passengers who would be put up here, accommodated and fed and looked after for no charge for the first 200 years, from 1150 right through to about 1330. So they would gather around the fireplace here, which I'm sure was very welcome to them on the cold evenings. And these beautiful windows would have been boarded up at night or in colder periods, or with cloth. They would have been covered because it would have been a very cold room otherwise. So if you came along and you wanted to use the ferry, from 1150 to 1330, this was a free passage. So the monks rowed over the River Mersey twice a day, often a perilous journey due to the currents and the tides. It could often take up to 90 minutes to get across the River Mersey. It was a greater body of water then, but that gives you just some idea of how much of an undertaking it was. So you would come here, you would ask to be taken across on the ferry, and if the weather was too inclement that day, or you'd missed a passage, you would be put up here on the floor. They would give you a mat to sleep on, and they would feed you from the kitchens behind us and look after you. And this was all classed as helping a pilgrim. You were a traveller, therefore you were a pilgrim. And under the Benedictine order, that meant that you had to be looked after for free. So in 1536, the priory sadly closed, but from 1330, a charter was passed by King Edward II to allow the monks to charge for a ferry service, as they were becoming quite financially, they were struggling financially. So from 1330 onwards, you paid for your ferry service, and it was the first regulated ferry across the Mersey. So that in itself is quite an important piece of history. So I'll walk across the Great Hall now and take you towards the other section of the Western Range, which was the monks' parlour. Now on the ground floor here would have been the monks' parlour. That would be their window, with their window seat straight ahead of us. And directly next to it, we have a squint window, or a leper's window as they were often called. Now a squint window had many purposes, so it's quite a curiosity that it's here. As you can see, it's on a diagonal angle, so that if arrows were shot or weapons, they would have a much more difficult time to reach a target. But also they were created in priories and churches to enable women or people who weren't usually allowed to watch a church service to watch whilst being hidden. Or maybe the monks could look out without anyone seeing them looking, so they had some privacy there and some protection. It's quite a curiosity, this squint window being here in the monk's parlour. The Western Range was built, we believe, in the early 1200s, several decades after the chapter house and many of the other buildings on the Priory site. It's quite a grand area and would have been very impressive in its time. Directly above the monk's parlour would have been the Prior's lodgings. So we can see the Prior's fireplace there and his grand window to the skies. And then that little doorway there was his private entrance to the church that was on the site. There was a very grand church on this site, but unfortunately, due to the dissolution of the monasteries and over the centuries of neglect, and it was just left to go to rack and ruin, and finally it no longer exists. We only have the two corner pieces left of that church. We have some very grand drawings, so we do know just how impressive it was, a building. So I'll move very slowly around the Western Range for you, just so she can get a glimpse and a sense of how beautiful it is. The ground would have been several feet lower than this, 1 or 2 feet lower, which would make more sense of these beautiful windows. And that's our Western Range for you. Thank you so much for watching.